Hello guys, another video from series Salesforce Walk and Talk, and today we will talk about deployments. So when we need to develop something for Salesforce, we have a couple of choices. So we could connect our local IDE to that environment where we are trying to develop our new solutions. We could work in the developer console related to this work, or we could connect, let's say, cloud-based IDE such something as, for example, a site.io or maybe some another stuff. At this moment, I think that the most popular one is VS Code with extensions related to development with Salesforce, and mostly developers using it for their development. So when the developer connected that IDE to the actual environment, they could actually grab the code from that environment. They could deploy code to that environment with the help of that IDE. There are also other kind of possible tools how we could actually work with deployments if, for example, we need to promote our code that we developed on one environment to another. So first of them, it's possibility for us to use some boxes. So we could use Salesforce sandboxes if we are following development structure where we have production org, UAT, for example, QA org, and then we have development sandboxes. And in that case, if all of them are actually connected between each other, so that means that what we could do is we could actually use change sets for us to bring our code from one environment to another. And that is, let's say, standard Salesforce out-of-the-box functionality where we could specify what kind of metadata components we would like to include from one environment and to promote to another one. So next possible way that we could use it's help of Jenkins. So Jenkins, it's, let's say, such kind of tool where we could automate different kind of processes and where we could specify different kind of jobs. So in terms of jobs, we could specify jobs to work based on the Git webhooks. Like, for example, when some pull request was merged into appropriate branch, then automatically run deployment and deploy code to the specific environment, for example, which is related to that branch. Or we could have some kind of jobs that we could run manually. So in that case, what is possible for us to add as well into these Jenkins jobs, it's, for example, regularly deployment. Like, for example, for each end of the month, deploy something that we have in the UAT related branch into the UAT environment, or something like this. So, like, you could imagine how many use cases we could have. And on top of it, what you could build with Jenkins, you could actually build PMD code scan and security code scan. So those two scans, let's say, could work in parallel, and if somebody created a pull request, you could run your validations against that specific environment, and based on what kind of, let's say, restrictions do you have against that environment, you could see what are actual results related to your code. So that means that with Jenkins, as we just mentioned, we have a possibility to manually deploy the code, and we have a possibility for us to deploy the code with scalable job or jobs which are working based on the webhooks. So another possible way for us to deploy code from one environment to another, it's a possibility to use packages which we could grab from the workbench. So if you have your package XML, you could, with the help of workbench, download the exact, let's say, zip file with metadata which is specified in this package XML, and then what you could do is you could actually, with the same workbench, connect it to another environment and upload that specific metadata. So I remember that we did something like this on one of the project, and it was, let's say, kind of interesting experience where it was required for us to put that kind of packages with a code that we changed it into actual Jira tickets, because there was let's say, big security on the project, and we haven't access to to even work with the Git at the beginning of the project. So that's why to each item in the Jira we are just attached such kind of packages, and here was the way that I just described it, how we are prepared those kind of packages. So next tool that we will take into consideration, it's at this moment Salesforce already released, I think, Salesforce CI. It's or no, not even Salesforce CI, Salesforce DevOps Center. And what they did, it's they actually providing basic functionality where we could build our pipeline. Like for example, we could specify which kind of environments we would like to connect, and we are connecting environments to this specific pipeline, like in the necessary view. Like for example, we have development boxes, we have QA box, we have UAT box and prod box. So that means that we, on our environment where we are enabling it to work as Salesforce DevOps, so in that environment we are actually configuring that specific pipeline. So once we configure it pipeline, so for doing so we need to have credentials for each of these environments. So that means that some person who have access to different environments need to be able to configure it. And then we could decide how we could actually promote code from one environment to another. And in that case, I remember that last time when I revisited release notes, I was able to see that there was some limitation related to what kind of JIT systems it support. Maybe it was just at this moment supporting something like a GitHub and not supporting GitLab or Azure or something else. But anyway, it's a out of the box free, cost free, if I remember correctly, solution which allow you to automate the way how you're promoting your code from one environment to another. So another analogs of the same tool which are already existing in the market, it's for example Capado. So Capado, it's pretty cool tool that I was able to use in the past, and the way how it works is in the following. So you have some kind of org where you installing, let's say, package, and that package, it's a Capado package. And what you're getting once you install that specific package to the environment, you also have a possibility to specify your pipeline to store credentials of, let's say, different kind of persons related to each environment. And then you could decide from which environment you would like to actually grab the metadata. So once you selected your environment and you created your user story in the Capado, so then from the specific environment you could decide what kind of metadata should be actually retrieved, and you have, let's say, kind of possibility to browse what was changed with different kind of filters, and possibility for you to select what was changed, like for example last day, what was changed by you, or what was, I don't know, like changed for last week, and so on and so forth. And you could also filter it by the appropriate metadata. Like for example, you could get page layouts, you could get Apex classes, fields, profiles, and other stuff. So it's a possibility for you to grab necessary metadata. And then what is also cool about the Capado is you have a functionality where you could actually specify the order of different steps related to your user story. So that means that you could attach in the Capado pre-deployment steps, you could attach post-deployment steps, and those post and pre-deployment steps could even be Apex scripts. So that means that Capado have an, let's say, functionality which could actually execute your Apex scripts. Like for example, if you just released some specific custom setting to some environment, like for example to QA or UAT, so that means that if in your Capado you will have a code which is populated custom setting, so that means that once your user story will be deployed with the basics and metadata related to that custom settings, so that step will, after it, update it with appropriate values. So it could be used in such kind of scenarios, like for example, when you need to store report IDs, and prior to you need to actually deploy reports, and functionality similar to that. Also, it's possible to attach here kind of manual tasks for you to be able to track. Let's say if you have your release management team, so that means that your release management team could open items assigned to release, and what they could see what are actually steps that need to be done prior to deployment of some user stories. If it's manual steps, that then they are doing them. If it's Apex scripts, then they are even not, let's say, not worry about it, because it will be executed automatically. So mostly when I was able to work with Capado, I was able to see that mostly all of kind of components are actually supported. There was just a couple of them which were not supported. If I remember correctly, it was something related to omni-channel, so maybe some settings or something like this. But what we did is we just documented them into the post-deployment steps and just it. So it was a pretty interesting experience. So next tool that we will discuss, it's a gear set. Gear set working a little bit differently, but the main and general idea of all these tools, it's in general kind of the same, because what we are doing first of all, it's we are going to the gear set, right? We are building pipeline. When we are building a pipeline, we need to have access to those different kind of environments. Let's say if we are including here our prod, UAT, QA, so that means that the person who is configuring so should have system administrator users on these environments for him to be able to connect them together. So once that person actually connecting that environment into the pipeline, so that means that he could invite developers. And GearSet, it's actually, let's say, standalone application, right, which is available as website. So you are going to that website, you are connecting your different, let's say, environments here, and then what you could do else is you could connect your Git source. And in that case, when we have different kind of environments, so that means that when we connect in Git source, so each developer, when he connects in his specific development box to the pipeline, he needs to make sure that he connected it properly. Let's say GearSet provide documentation how each developer could actually, let's say, connect their environment to the pipeline. For example, for them to be able to push to the general development environment. And from there, what they need to do is developers need to actually connect their personal dev.org credentials. Then they need to connect their personal, let's say, Git accounts related to that project. And after that, they will be able to configure specific branch which is related to their environment. So in that case, the way how GearSet provide the work, in general the same, because we have like these pipelines, we have environments connected and all this kind of stuff, but each environment have its own related to it Git branch. So that means that even your personal, let's say, development box which is connected to the pipeline have its own development branch. So in general it provides, let's say, kind of similar functionalities that other tools where we are creating pipeline do. What is else usually available in such kind of tools? It's a possibility for us to include code scanners and let's say quality gates which could be applied for each of the environments. Like for example in the GearSet, what we have is we have a possibility for us to actually include for each environment a different rule set of PMD, where we could decide what should be our restrictions. Like for example, if for QA environment, let's say, we relax those rules, so that means that for example for UAT they could be more serious. But in general it will be great for us to apply the same kind of rules between environments, because if you will think about it, if some developer did something right, promoted to QA and it was passing, but like it was tested, and then when you're promoting it to UAT, if it's failing, then it will require for him to rework. If he will rework something, so then again QA need to test it, and then again you need to promote it to UAT. So that's why it will be great to align different kind of rules between those different environments to make sure that your code quality, let's say, is good right from the beginning of the project. So in that case you will be aligned that when you will promote your code to the top level environments, that everything will actually behave as expected in that case. So I think we covered some kind of, let's say, basics around deployments. So that means that now we could discuss, let's say, who should be actually responsible for that on the project. Mostly in different kind of teams. Usually we have functionality, or let's say dedicated persons, right? And those dedicated persons helping us to, let's say, move our code from one environment to another. And it could be release managers. So release managers could decide, let's say, for example, in terms of the list of user stories that are passed QA testing, what user stories need to be promoted to UAT for us to be able to show it, for example, for client client QA team. And in that case, what is required from that person to do, it's to align with the QA team on it, align with the project team, and then everything what he should be able to do with the help of this kind of tools, like for example Capado or Gearset, it's just to specify what kind of user stories he would like to include into the promotions, click those special checkboxes, create, let's say, a kind of release, and those pull requests that he will include into the release will be then promoted to the appropriate environment. But that person need to take care about all this kind of, let's say, communications around it. Let's say, what are approved user stories, what should be promoted, and so on and so forth. And in that case, it will be properly communicated, properly promoted, and that person will be able to explain why some certain user stories are actually promoted to some environment, why some of them are actually not promoted. So let's say he will be able to control everything, and in terms of let's say urgency of promotions, he will be able to do what is necessary to do. But on some projects we could see that mostly developers are actually responsible for the code promotions from the development box till the UAT mostly, and sometimes to the prod. So it's again depend on how the project is structured in terms of the project team. But in that case, developers working closely with the product owner, and they are, let's say, discussing each time when some user stories are ready for go to, let's say, prod, so then they could help to promote those user stories. Of course, we are not talking here about the situation when we have, let's say, kind of incremental deployment to the production after each sprint, where QA team, for example, signing off some kind of different user stories, and those different user stories are actually going to the prod. So it's, like also another approach, and there are tons of different kind of approaches, but I just highlighting some of them which I decided to cover in that video.